Turn off your lights. Make sure your doors and windows are locked. Things are about to get spooky. There's Something Wrong with My New Tiny House by Pennane. The recent trend in tiny house builds intrigued me. Everything from turning a shed into a home, a shipping container, or even a van fascinated me. How many of these people moved from city living into isolation, living off the land by growing their own food in gardens made from recycled material, had me wondering if I could do something like that. I recently broke it off with my girlfriend and wanted to move out of the city. One too many break-ins, nasty bouts with slumlords, and the general sense that the world seemed broken made me long for a simpler life. I decided to take a risk and try it for myself. I first inquired about suitable land that allowed for city water and electric hookup. My friend Mikkel referred to me to reach out to a friend of his father's, Dave. I knew that it had loads of property in the wood area not far from Columbus. The gentleman in question often allowed campers to rent his land for a scenic natural experience. He made a lot of money in the summer months. But would he be interested in letting me rent and build a house on his property? I got his number from my friend and called him to discuss. Hello? Hi, my name is Kurt. I was referred to you by Mikkel Ashling regarding some rental properties that may be available. Mikkel, you say? Yes, he's a friend. Good guy, I said. I got a spot. What did you want to do? Are we talking camping for a weekend or a week? I'm looking for an area I can rent to build on. I'm trying to downsize and I was told you might be someone to reach out to. There was a long silence and I had to look at the phone to ensure he hadn't hung up. Yep, I got a place. You can come meet me tomorrow and I'll give you a tour of the property and we can discuss payment. The next day I met Dave at the large property. We discussed what I wanted to do, make a home on the land and pay monthly rent. He seemed eager to rent the property to me, but there was a stipulation. I need a full year's rent up front, and you can do anything you like out there. I only ask that you are quiet as the horses get spooked easily. I thought about it and then finally agreed. Dave said he would even help me by getting me in contact with one of his contractor friends. The cost was more than I had anticipated, but it was worth it. I was going to have my own home on nearly 10 acres of land with only one neighbor. I was also given free rein on how I wanted it constructed. So, as promised, my journey began. I found one of those shipping containers on eBay from a guy in Pennsylvania who was selling it for $650. I just had to pay for hauling it back. I, once again, was assisted by Dave, who just happened to have a truck to haul it. It was nice to be living so close to a guy that was so kind. I could set up the unit and begin working on the interior immediately. I didn't make it have a ton of extra features. I mainly was going for a couple windows, a bed, and a space to store my things. The contractor that Dave sent me was good and helped me with the design, but I put everything together myself. I'm proud of what I came up with. The few things I didn't expect was that I could get running water, but the toilet didn't flush as well as I liked. I was almost deciding on a compost toilet. Still, Dave said that of all things, he did not allow the dumping of any kind on his property, nor did he want me creating a large garden bed, which seemed odd to me because he had been so cool about everything else. So that meant the composting garden was out unless I grew things in a box on my makeshift patio. So, after a few months, I was settled in. It was a nice and quiet place to rest my head. When they said that nature was healing, they didn't lie. I spent most of my time working and sitting on my new deck. It was peaceful and calming. It wasn't long after my first month that I know something about my new tiny house. Well, it wasn't exactly one of those tiny houses, storage container homes you could see on those home and garden type television shows. There was just something that began to make me feel uneasy. I woke up one morning to the sound of my shower running. When I got out of bed, I could have sworn I saw someone running out my sliding door that led to my new patio. I never jumped out of bed so fast. I ran to the door and saw nothing where I should have seen someone running away. I called Dave that very morning after the sun came up. I asked if he'd seen anything on the property. He said he checked the security cameras, which he did while I was talking to him. Dave said he couldn't see anything unusual, and I was more than welcome to check them myself. He even offered to install one for me. Again, here was this guy that was so nice and polite, yet I opted not to take him up on the offer. Instead, I decided to install my own. I got one that required a phone app and had infrared availability. I still needed to get it delivered to my new residence. Instead, I had a new camera delivered to the post office box that I set up when I moved in. Once I installed it, I could do nothing but wait. Then I waited some more. Actually, I waited about a week or so, and nothing. Perhaps I was losing my mind. Maybe what I had seen that morning was just me dreaming. That could have explained what I had seen. I was asleep when the second incident occurred, and my phone woke me up. My cell had several notifications from the camera app. I sat up in bed and clicked on the first notification. All I could see was what looked like two eyes that appeared off the deck of my tiny house. I skipped past it, assuming it was a deer. The second notification was that of a shadow, but I couldn't make out what it was. The third notification? I clicked on it, and there was nothing there. I clicked on the last one, and it was completely black. I was annoyed, but went back to sleep. The next day, I had to go into the city for work. We had some big meeting that required me to show up in person. I sat in a large auditorium taking notes from the CEO about security changes we had to make on our work computers. I was trying to pay attention when my phone dinged. I looked down, and there was another notification from the camera app. This time I saw what looked like a woman with shaggy hair and hardly any clothes on. She was standing staring at my patio doors. She wasn't moving. She just stood there. Within a few moments she had moved closer, but I didn't see her walk. She just appeared. Then in the background it looked like something or someone was standing behind her. At that point, the camera went black. I can't tell you the feeling I got from watching her. I didn't know if she was flesh and blood, a ghost, or something else. I drove home after my meeting in a state of panic. I was concerned with my safety, but also wondering if I was overreacting. It may be a curious camper for one of Dave's other rentals. I pulled onto the property. I saw Dave, and he waved as I pulled past him towards the drive next to the newly created tiny house. That's when I saw something strange. One of the planter boxes set up on the patio railing for some of the herbs was knocked over. I picked it up and cleaned it up the best I could. I noticed someone standing behind me and turned to see Dave shaking his head. Looks like we got raccoons. You gotta be careful when you're planting things. That's why I said no gardens. I can't tell you the number of times we tried, but the missus and I never got anything going. We tried putting fences up around it, but whatever lives out here always gets into it. I thanked Dave and watched him return to his house and go inside. I placed the planter box back on the deck railing, hoping it would stay put this time. That's when I noticed something. There was what looked like a hole under my tiny new house. Could it have been an animal? I have to set up a few traps and relocate whatever it was. I certainly didn't need an infestation of groundhogs or rabbits. I put my briefcase inside my house, locked my door, and went to shower. I was staying in the shower for a while when the water suddenly shut off on me. What the hell? I grabbed a towel and went to investigate. When I went to look outside to see what could have stopped the water, I saw a man standing on my deck. Only it wasn't just any man, it was Dave, and only he didn't look like himself. He looked disheveled and broken, with a furious expression on his face. Hey, Dave, is everything okay? The water just shut off. I stood standing there half naked. Dave said nothing and then walked around the other side of the house. I followed him, but this was the crazy part. He disappeared. He completely disappeared. I was trying to figure out what to make of it. The water came back on the second I walked back into the house. I felt awful for pissing Dave off. Only something didn't feel right. I asked him about it the next day when I went into town. I was driving my car and stopped while he was carrying animal feed to his cows. I just want to apologize for anything I could have done to make you angry, I said, looking at him. Dave just stared at me puzzled. Sorry, I don't think you've ever done anything disrespectful. You pay your utilities, take care of things around here, and you paid your rent for the next 10 months. You must be mistaken. He chuckled. No, when the water shut off, you stood on my patio and looked so pissed off. Kurt, I have no idea what you're talking about. Now it was my turn to be puzzled. I have no idea what I'm supposed to think. Could Dave have multiple personalities? Does he black out on a regular? I don't believe that is the case. I don't really know where to go from here. I'm not terrified, but after that conversation with Dave later that night, I was awoken again by the app on my phone. At that very moment, it gave me a live feed of that woman staying outside. Still, only when I look out onto the patio was nobody there. The next day, I noticed that the hole near my patio looked bigger than it was. That was about 3 weeks ago, and so far, no new weird occurrences have happened. I'm not sure what to think. If anything new happens, I'll be sure to write more. I have lost count of how many times I've washed my hands today, but I just know they aren't clean yet. I scrub harder, knowing that all the filth will go away once I start rubbing the skin away. My Husband is Not My Husband by Atlmoonvtn. My husband is not my husband. I've been with my husband for 30 years. We fell in love in high school, that whole cliche. We live in a small town in Illinois, no kids, but 3 cats. For the past week or so, he's been acting strange, and at first, I was really worried. I thought he didn't love me anymore. It started with him not talking to me as much. Usually, he tells me everything. We are best friends. I thought maybe he just wasn't feeling well, that work was stressing him out. Then he was saying things that weren't right. Saying his boss, Jess, at work was getting married, but his boss name is Kevin, and he's an old guy, about 85 and widowed. But maybe Kevin retired and this Jess took over and he forgot to tell me. It was just overall giving me bad feelings, and I couldn't really explain it until today. I'm writing this as an example to tell people that what the government is saying is true. I never trusted the government, but you know, most sane people don't. Today started normal. The sun rose at 6:52 a.m. after I'd already gone out of bed. It's Saturday, but I'm so used to getting up early for work that I just get up early every day. I made coffee, sat on the couch, and turned on the news. My husband usually gets up around 8 or so on the weekends, so I usually just sit around, read, or watch TV until he wakes up, and then we make breakfast and decide what we are doing. This past week of him being weird made me on edge, so when he walked out of the bedroom, wide awake and dressed at 7:05 a.m., my fear for the day started.
Good morning, babe.
He didn't ever call me babe. He called me donut as an ode to our first date at a cafe, where I ordered a donut and he said that a donut isn't a good lunch. Morning, you're up early. I smiled anyway, let him kiss me, and then he disappeared in the kitchen. When he was out of sight, I returned my attention to the news. And when I did, a message was on the bottom of the screen.
If you believe that your loved one is not who they are supposed to be, remain calm and leave your home immediately.
I stare as the message continues scrolling on the bottom of the screen.
You are not crazy. They are not your loved one. You are in danger.
I blinked a few times. The second Jacob walked into the living room, the message stopped scrolling.
I'm going to shower, and then we can go out for breakfast.
He says. He showers exclusively at night, and we never go out for breakfast anymore. Okay, hon. I smile and cup my mug in my hands. When he turns the corner, my eyes snap back to the screen.
Leave your home immediately and find the officer at the end of the street. We know who they are.
This has to be some kind of practical joke. Is it April 1st?
The government will remove the machine in place of your loved one. We are working on finding your family.
What the fuck? Okay, at this point, I was scared. Either it was a joke or I was in danger, and I didn't want to find out the hard way. So, in my bathrobe and slippers, I turned the TV off and set my half cup of coffee down. The shower is still running. But when I stood and made my way to the front door, it stopped. Not even 2 minutes after it was turned on. I stopped 2 steps from the door. When I turned around, Jacob was right there. I jumped. He had a very over-exaggerated worried look on his face, almost unnatural. You startled me, I laughed, my heart racing. Is this my husband? I kept trying to examine him, but the way his body and face looked was so unsettling I couldn't stare.
Where were you going?
He asked, monotone. Nowhere. I thought I heard someone on the porch. God, I'm glad I can think fast because he believed it.
Oh, is there someone out there?
The next 3 moments, I realized that it wasn't a joke. Because when Jacob turned to go to the front door, he glitched. That's the only way I can explain it. It was like watching a video on AI on TikTok or something. His arm was in one position, and then in 2 milliseconds it was behind his back. His head was tilted to the side. And then his head went back and his arms went back to his side. And then he was normally walking to the door. My heart was racing. I needed to get out. That was a quick shower, I said, swallowing hard.
Yeah, I was sweating last night. Wanted to rinse off.
That's a lie. He's a cold sleeper, and last night was freezing in the bedroom. I still don't know how to get out. After all the small talk, I think the thing realized that I knew, and I think it tried to kill me. All I know is I didn't drink the smoothie, and I got out. Now I'm sitting with hundreds or thousands of other people in our town's mall. Everyone is quiet. Everyone had a traumatizing experience. All they have told us so far is it's a failed experiment the government was working on that gained its own intelligence and has been multiplying and replacing our loved ones. It's not just our town, it's the whole country. If you're reading this and you think your loved one is not actually your spouse, kid, or friend, leave immediately. Find the officer. Get to safety. This is not a joke. They told us that the death count in just this first week is over 1 million. These things are unbelievably smart. Please listen.
Get out. Get out. Right now.
The world excitedly waited for the historic quote to be said by the first man to step foot on Mars. But we stayed quiet when he said, "Why are there remains of pregnant women here?" My Grave Mistake by Contour698. Don't get drunk and break into a cemetery in New Orleans. And if you do, don't piss on any tombs with a bunch of X marks all over it. I did that 6 days ago, Saturday, and I've died every day since. After leaving the cemetery that night, I stubbed my foot, stepping up on the curb, and broke my neck on the wall outside a bar. I dreamed of a woman that night. She wore a white dress and stared at me. But I couldn't have dreamed anything. Do the dead dream? Sunday morning, I woke up in my bed with no hangover. I had a clear head, which was rare for me in the mornings. But the detail the night before was still hazy. I checked myself out in the mirror, but didn't see any signs of damage. I remember tripping on the curb, then the wall of the bar came rushing towards me. I was so drunk that I didn't even put my hands out to catch myself. Then, blackness. I pushed the thought away. I started my day. I left my apartment and walked down the block to the corner diner. Most mornings I needed coffee to chase away my hangover. No hangover that morning, but the craving was still there. I sat at the counter and ordered. A tall, very dark-skinned man was sitting at the counter. He was dressed in an old-fashioned dark purple suit. He had coattails and all. He stood as I sat down, said good morning, and made his way out of the diner. "Be seeing you all later," he said to the diner. Everyone ignored him. I turned and looked at him as the door was slowly swinging shut. He tipped his top hat at me as he was putting it on. His smile was yellow just like his eyes. As the door swung shut, I could see him lighting a cigar. I think he winked at me. After my coffee, I walked over to Jackson Square. Maybe the fortune tellers could tell me something. They all turned me away. The real ones did, at least. You can tell which ones are real. After that failure, I walked back towards the river. A carriage horse got spooked by some tourists lighting firecrackers and caved the side of my head in with a kick. Monday, I woke up again in my bed. This was really happening. I searched the news, but there was no story about a horse killing anyone on Decatur Street. I gave in and decided that the only thing for me was to get nice and drunk. I was sober for a whole day. That was an accomplishment for me. Well, sober for a morning at least. That night, I tied one on. I couldn't get enough. At one point, I think I remember that tall guy from the diner buying me a drink. "What's this?" I asked as he handed me a double shot of something dark. "Oh, it's a rum for me, baby," he answered before throwing back his shot. I didn't care. I would have drunk anything that night. "Be seeing you around," he said before fading into the crowd of the bar. I was shot in the back while walking home. They killed me for the $9 I had in my pockets. In my dreams that night, the lady in white was sitting on a short stool with her back turned to me. I walked towards her, but she never turned around, no matter how close I got to her, no matter how far I stretched my hand to her. I couldn't touch her. Tuesday, I decided to stay in. If I don't go outside, I can't die, I thought. My mistake was to drink a fifth of vodka and try to take a bath. I must have passed out because when I came to, the water was freezing cold. I slipped getting out of the tub and bashed my head in on the rim of the toilet. I still couldn't reach the woman in white. She was working with something in her lap. Every time I walked around to the front of her to see what she was doing, I would just be looking at her back again. Wednesday, I believed the bed would be my sanctuary. Surely nothing bad can happen to me in bed. Things were going well until I smelled the smoke and heard the sirens. The fire must have started in an apartment below me. I threw open my front door and ran for the stairs. They collapsed as I made it to the landing. Since I was on the top floor and had nowhere to go, resigned, I walked back inside. People were staggering out of my building onto the street below. A crowd formed across the street, and some of them were pointing up at my window. The tall man was standing amongst them, smiling up at me. He tipped his hat at me as the floor collapsed and I fell into the inferno below. I found out what the woman in white was working with. This time she was standing. She had a dead chicken in her hands. With a quick motion, she twisted and wrenched the head from the chicken. She began chanting and moving in a circle, making a ring of blood on the ground around her. I called to her, but she ignored me. Right before I woke up, she glanced up at me, glaring into my eyes. By Thursday, I had given up. Whatever was happening to me was out of my control. My room was like it always was. No sign of a fire. As soon as I got up, I went straight for Bourbon Street because the bars never closed there. With an empty stomach, I got to work. Even on Bourbon Street, drunks aren't tolerated very well before noon. After getting kicked out of the third bar, I sat down on the curb with a big-ass beer. The tall man sat down beside me. We were quiet for a few minutes before I asked him, "Why is this happening to me?" Now, don't you worry about that, Cher. Just a few more days and it will be all over. Now, if you hurry, there is a party bus carrying a bachelorette party about to cross Bourbon just a few blocks that way." He pointed down the street. "The driver is a man a lot like you. He was out way too late last night and might not have all his faculties about him." I nodded and I stood up. The tall man called to me as I walked away. "Au revoir, mon ami." The bus plowed right through the stop sign. He was right. The driver never saw me. The bus squealed to a halt too late, with me trapped underneath. I could smell my skin melting on the scalding undercarriage. The driver ran out and saw what he did. He turned away and vomited as the party rushed out of the bus to see what was happening. A pretty lady wearing a sash that read bride saw me and dropped her tall, green novelty drink. The last thing I heard was the screams of her and her bridesmaids. The woman in white walked towards me in my dream that night. She held a dusky bottle with no label that was full of some type of dark liqueur. She stood in front of me and took a long pull from the bottle. With a look of disdain, she held the bottle out to me. I reached for it, but she pulled it away and spat the liquor in my face. She began chanting something in French Creole and walked around me in a circle, stopping periodically to tease me by holding the bottle out in front of her. Every time I reached for the bottle, she would pull it away, take another swig, and spit it back in my face. Her chanting continued in between her taunts. Finally, she stopped and stared at me with hatred. "Time to wake up, fool," she said. It wasn't English, but I understood her. She took one long pull from the bottle. Blood began to drip from between her lips, and she spewed it back onto me. I shot up from my sleep and was horrified to find my face and chest were covered in blood. I cleaned myself up and spent the rest of the day wandering aimlessly around my apartment. Eventually, I headed out and walked around the quarter until it was late into the night. The tall man would be waiting for me in a doorway or a window of a bar, always with a shot of rum held out and one for myself. I just ignored him and walked on. Well after midnight, near the edge of the quarter, I saw her waiting for me on the distant street corner. "Last chance, mon ami," said the tall man from the doorway of the quiet bar. The bar was dark because it was closing up. It was hard to make out the details of his face, but it looked like he was wearing white paint in the shape of a crude skull. I took the offered shot and drank it down slowly, savoring the burn. She rounded the corner and I followed. As I walked, I would lose sight of her, but she would always be there when I turned a corner or a car passed by, just standing and staring at me from a distance. Eventually, I found myself walking next to a tall white wall. An opening in the wall revealed a huge, ornate iron gate. I stopped at the gate, and it slowly swung open, creaking on its centuries-old hinges. Of course. Back where this all began, the cemetery. My feet carried me down the boulevard of this miniature city of the dead. She was gone again, so I scanned the side alleys for her. I saw a flash of her white dress between the crumbling tombs, so I ventured deep into the cemetery after her. She was waiting for me next to a tomb. The tall man stood with her. When I stopped in front of them, he turned and removed the name plaque of one of the openings to the crypt. The stale air that issued out a smell of must and decay. He bowed low and gestured me inside. I began to weep, but still climbed inside. I turned over onto my back in a tight space and looked out. He smiled at me and said, "It's been a pleasure, truly." He lifted the plaque back up and sealed me inside, covering me in sweet darkness. Finally, I could rest. Jesus Christ, Sarah! I can't believe you actually convinced me to ride this fucking thing. I laughed, breathing a sigh of relief as the roller coaster finally came to a complete stop. As the ringing in my ears began to settle, I finally noticed the panicked voices of the crowd around me, turning my head to find my friend was gone. And with that, my friends, our time together is coming to an end. As always, I would like to thank the writers who let me read their stories today. You all did an amazing job writing those stories. And I would love to hear which one was your favorite down below. I would like to thank PA Nightmares, who played the husband, and Phoenix Fire, who played the announcer. Thank you guys so much for helping me bring that story to life even more. If you liked them, their links are down below to their channels. Now, if you enjoyed these stories, hit the like button and make sure it feels it. If you're new, please subscribe and turn that pretty little bell to all notifications. And if you'd like to help this channel / podcast grow, please share it with anyone who might like it. And if you'd like to help in other ways, well, I have Patreon and memberships where for $1 a month you get early access to the audios and a few other bonuses. And I would like to tell you guys that I launched another channel called 242 Slumbers. It is the same stories that you just heard, but I use other falling rain, rolling thunder, and I make it louder so it helps lull you more to sleep as you listen to my voice. And I end it with either a half an hour or 20 minutes of that sound effect to help keep you lulled asleep. That channel is geared more towards helping you fall asleep and stay there. I've been told that having these sound effects help people fall and stay asleep. And if you are looking for a channel like that, well, check it out. Link down below as always. 242 Reads will still be my hashtags online. That's never going anywhere. 242 Reads is my main channel and my main focus. Slumbers will stay more towards trying to help people sleep, so it won't get the coffee streams, the shorts, none of that is going to that channel. I want to keep it simple there, so if you're listening, you always have a relaxing experience, nothing jarring to wake you up. With all that being said, if it's something you're interested in, I hope you'll check it out. But thank you guys for watching and listening. It really means the world to me, guys. Sleep tight and don't let 42 bite.